Welcome to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, hosted by me, Zibby Owens. It's an award-winning podcast with over 1,900 episodes, all featuring authors of books you love and those you have yet to discover. Listen daily 5 times a week. Then go to zibbymedia.com and learn more about what the LA Times called the Zibbyverse. Zibby Media includes Zibby's Bookshop, an independent bookstore in Santa Monica, Zibby Books Publishing, Zibby Retreats, Zibby's Book Club, and more. Go check it out at zibbymedia.com and follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens. It'll take you where you need to go. Thanks for listening. Caro Carver is the author of Bad Tourists, a novel. Caro lives in Scotland with her husband and 4 children. She is reader in creative writing at the University of Glasgow, teaches for the Faber Academy and the Curtis Brown Academy, and regularly speaks on panels and hosts events on writing. Caro is happiest when traveling and takes inspiration from her travels to write her books. Bad Tourists is her first book written under the pseudonym of Caro Carver. She is also published as CJ Cooke for her gothic thrillers. Welcome, Caro. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss Bad Tourists, a novel. Congratulations.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and chat about it with you.
Oh, yay. Amazing. I love the whole premise of a post-divorce trip with your girlfriends. So fun. I feel like that should definitely be a thing. Like it should have its own name, right? Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I heard about someone doing that on Instagram, and I was like, yeah, that should be a thing. You know, it's a new chapter and it's a new start. So yeah, we should celebrate that.
I love that. And this is also kind of a new chapter, a new start for you with your new pseudonym for this book and new genre and all of that. So it's very fitting. You know, you should have taken a trip for this. Perhaps you did.
I did.
Oh, you did. Amazing. Where'd you go?
I went to the Maldives.
Oh, well, there you go. Life imitating art.
It was after, yeah, right. It was after COVID. So it was like, you know, we'd cancelled quite a few little trips or like multiple times because things kept getting shut down. So I was like, right, we're going away. We're going to the Maldives. So yeah.
Oh my gosh. And so is that where did you write it then? Now I'm getting the timing. So when did you do what? How did this happen?
This was 2 summers ago, just almost 2 years ago. I guess it was sort of, it was this time 2 years ago. I'd had ideas for sort of 2 sections of the book, if you like. The scene in the guest house, which is at the beginning of the book, that came to me years ago, actually, and I didn't really know what to do with that, but it kept coming back every time I went to stay in that particular guest house in Glasgow. It came back as a story, and then I had the idea for the divorce trip, and we went to the Maldives, I think, like May 2022, and I think when I was there and I had just a chance to unwind for the first time in so long, because Scotland, we had really tough COVID rules. And so my children were off school for months and I was having to work full time still from home while homeschooling 4 kids. It was just a disaster. And I was really at the end of my tether. So the trip, the week in the Maldives was the first time that I just stopped. And so ideas came for books and for this novel. And by the time I came home, it was all there. And I spent the summer writing it, a first draft of it. And it was all the characters were just fully formed, just told me what was what. And it was a joy to write. Honestly, it was just a pleasure to be in the company of these characters. I know I sound bonkers when I say that.
You don't? If there is ever a place where you not to sound bonkers, it is this podcast where many people have said the exact same thing before you. So it's totally fine.
I just loved it. I had so much fun writing these women. They were just the best. And I was just, I thought I want to do this again. I want to write more of these sort of books that are just fun. And they examine female rage in a way that I hadn't done before. So
interesting.
I was excited by that.
So you got your start very early. I love the little clip of you at age 5 winning whatever prize you did, or right? I'm assuming you were holding up some sort of prize. Maybe you weren't 5, but anyway.
I was 5 in that photo, actually. Yeah, it's in my office here, so I know.
Aww, it's so cute.
I was just so little.
Give me the story of how you got your start and
Yeah.
how you were motivated by violence, and now you're writing about rage, and I feel like there's a theme coursing throughout. So, tell me your story.
I grew up in East Belfast during the sort of tail end of the Troubles, and my home life wasn't great. My father was abusive and really violent. My mom obviously was subjected to that, as was I. My mom was 17 when she had me, so she was vulnerable. And we lived in a really rough part of Belfast as well, and we were really poor. And yeah, so there was just this very unsettling atmosphere at home all the time, constantly. And I remember writing specifically to deal with that because I didn't know, I was too young to have a language to articulate what was actually very normal to me, but was not normal at the same time because I was so scared all the time. And I had places I went to that I wasn't scared and I wasn't unsettled, but then I would come home and feel on edge. And writing really gave a way to just manage that, I think, a way to cope. And then, as well as my home life, there was the stuff going on in Northern Ireland. So I've been writing for forever, and it was just such a compulsion that, yeah, my stories were like containers for all these feelings and these things that were going on, and I was able to control the uncontrollable, if you like.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I didn't really see, although I wrote stories when I was a child, I turned to poetry quite soon. So I was a poet actually first. And it was only the birth of my son when I was pregnant with him when I was 29. And I had a pregnancy condition that was very painful for me to walk. So I read a lot of novels in the bath, which was the only time I could kind of relax and feel. And I guess that brought the sort of novels to my mind again. So that's when I started writing novels again. And I've been writing ever since. So yeah, this is my 10th novel, I think.
Wow, what a story! Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so sorry that you were an abuse victim, if you will, and how you've sort of shared it openly is so powerful. A lot of people
Thank you.
don't do that, and it's wonderful to see what you can do with that material to, be like,
Yeah.
no, I'm sort of taking back this narrative, and watch out. What's your relationship with your parents like now?
Well, my father, he was the victim of childhood abuse as well. So
Oh no.
this was a continuation of violence, right? A cycle of violence. And he committed suicide when I was 13. So he died. We got the news on Christmas morning, which was not
Oh.
wonderful. So yeah, so that he was only 35. And I suppose as I've got older, I've, thought a lot about, I guess I have more sympathy for him because, I can see how his childhood contributed to how he was. He was just out of control and wanted to, I guess, regain some of the power that he had lost. But, you know, uh, yeah. In my novels, though, I think I'm really invested in writing women's stories, particularly because of what I grew up perceiving in Northern Ireland as well, that, women, it was not a great place to be a woman at all. And I would sort of hear these stories from my mom and from my grandmother, and they would really, they've stayed with me because I just felt that these incredible, smart women, all their opportunities were taken from them. And this is not the Middle Ages. This is, 19, my mom was born in 1961, and yeah, a lot of her opportunities were just cut because the fact that she was a woman. And that's been something that I've wanted to write about in various ways. And I just love celebrating really, really smart, savvy women on the page, and the way that they manage sometimes the prejudices that are thrown at them because they don't take them lying down. Just like the women that I knew, they didn't take it, easily. They railed against a lot of the prejudice, and it in some ways made them incredibly strong as human beings, but maybe not in ways that, they didn't have the career success. They didn't have the kind of outward markers of who they were to celebrate, but I saw it.
Wow. Well, in Bad Tourists, you also do have one, a character, Jade, who is, not, who is the same thing has befallen her. I'm like, why am I struggling with these words? Who is also being abused? Oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? And you write about that, in sort of harrowing detail as well. And that
Yeah.
fear, which now I see,
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like, like we all have to make peace with our demons in some way, right? And sometimes
Yeah.
you end up
Yeah.
just rewriting all the stuff that doesn't go away. Do you feel like that happens? Like, oh, I'm not going to write about this in this book, and then it seeps its way in?
Yeah. Yeah, always. There's always something that comes up, because Jade, I hadn't actually, until I started writing, she wasn't there. Like, the other women were there,
Mm.
but she wasn't. And I started this new chapter and it was just a different person talking. So I feel like a medium. Oh, excuse my dog. I felt like a medium, because there was suddenly this young voice and she was very scared and very vulnerable. And so I just went with it. And yeah, her story, I just felt, was something that was quite familiar to a lot of women, that she was in the Maldives, newlywed, outwardly celebrating, deliriously happy, but not. And yeah, so her story was just there, of domestic violence and the kind of control that her new husband has over her. But it's such I think that's when I hear of stories of women, facing domestic violence and control in a relationship, you just think, really, still, is this still going on? And of course it is. And I think, well, I don't know. I write because one of the reasons I write my stories is because I want people to feel seen.
Mm-hmm.
And the experiences we have can make us feel very alone. But if we encounter them in a book, we don't feel alone so much. And so it was important for me to speak to that experience.
Wow. And I hear it's also going to be a Paramount Plus production. Is that right? I read that.
So we haven't got a streamer yet, but the company, so it's actually a UK and US kind of production,
Oh.
and they haven't got a streamer on board yet, but the company in the UK have worked with Paramount Plus before, so who
Oh,
knows?
I see. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's really exciting. Because I saw this so vividly in my mind, that the whole kind of story was just cinematically in my head. I am really excited to see it on the screen, because I just think it'll be incredible. I think it's just one of those books that will really translate across really well into a TV series in particular. So, and I did love White Lotus,
Yeah.
and the whole idea of a resort and all the different, interweaving of people's lives and where they're at is just brilliant. So,
Well,
yeah,
it's like White Lotus meets Big Little Lies, right? You must
I
have used
think
that,
so.
right? Because the women's friendship and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good way to capture it, actually. The sort of vibe of this book is very much White Lotus meets Big Little Lies, which is just, yeah, I want to write more of these sort of books, because that's just the best description. So much fun, right? And especially, although Jade is a young character, I've seen a lot of reviews so far that have mentioned the age of these women, that they're in their 40s, that they're perimenopausal. And I think that was a conscious choice on my part. And I'm glad that people have picked up on it, because I don't feel we see a lot of this chapter of women's lives represented in books.
Yep.
And yet it's a very interesting moment. And when I was writing Jade, I was reflecting on my younger self, when I was in a controlling, abusive relationship in my early 20s with a man very like my father. And not as bad as Jade, but I didn't have to do any research to write Jade and to understand what it's like to be sort of controlled like that, and to be very in a position like, what do I do? But I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, I'm interested in writing about the way you grow as a woman and the way you change. Like, the me in my mid-40s is just so much stronger. I don't have the figure of my 22-year-old self, but I feel the people that just messed with me and controlled me back then, I'm no, you wouldn't want to cross me now. And I'm not alone in saying that. Like, a lot of women I speak to, and a lot of friends of mine are the same, that they have overcome a lot of, I guess, micro challenges as well as macro challenges. They've built careers at the same time as looking after children and picking up the invisible load, and it has made them titans. And we need to celebrate that more. It absolutely blows my mind that women at this age are seen as invisible and like not as beautiful, and all of this crazy talk. We need to be celebrating these women.
I agree. Let me jump on that bandwagon, please, as a 47-year-old, like woman and very much in the throes of it all. So
Yeah, right.
I mean, I'm sure by the time this comes out, I run a publishing company too, and we just acquired a book called It's Getting Hot in Here about a very menopausal woman who,
Yeah.
menopausal rom-coms, because like, why not? Anyway.
Yeah. I love that. Sign me up. I will be reading that so hard. That's great.
Your next trip to the Maldives, I'll send you a copy.
Yes, please.
Although
Definitely.
actually, I just read that the Maldives, not to get political, have banned all Israelis from even going there. Did you hear that? So
No, I didn't. Or maybe I did, actually.
yeah.
Maybe
Anyway,
I did,
whatever.
but I didn't. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Crazy
Okay.
times. Crazy times.
Indeed. Yeah.
But
God.
no, the Maldives has always been on my wish list. In fact, one time I tried to book book a trip there. So I found the hotel, and we could only go for like 4 days, and I was like, oh, it can't be that far. Then I went and looked at flights, and it was like plus 24 hours.
Yeah.
So
It was.
yeah.
It was definitely a long ways away to fly. So for the next book, though, because I've just turned in the next book as Caro Carver. I don't have a title yet, but it's set in Capri, which is like an island off
Yes.
the coast of Naples in Italy. That was amazing. I was just there at the end of April and beginning of May, and it was so beautiful. It does make you question your life choices, like, why do I not live there, right?
Exactly.
Why am I I mean, I love Scotland, but why am I not in Capri? So
Yeah.
amazing.
I know. Every place except for I live in New York City full time, and I'm like, what am I doing here? I also have 4 kids, by the way, so related very strongly with your homeschool work COVID situation, like so many other people. How do you handle your, experience with unsavory gentlemen and raising kids and sharing the information and all of that? Like, I always struggle with what to tell my kids about basically everything related to my past.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think it's probably, we're raising our generation, I think, are raising kids like we don't have our childhoods to draw on here because we didn't grow up with the internet. But I also think that, I don't know, I just think in some ways, we romanticize our childhoods a wee bit, because I spent all my childhood on the streets like being approached by unsavory men, like very young. So it's whether it's on the streets or in person or on screen, all of these things can happen. I think I'm just very forthright with my kids. So I just say it as it is. Like, for example, I always struggled to tell my kids that Santa Claus was real. So I would just say, my kids would say, is Santa Claus real? And I'd say no. And they would make a conscious decision to ignore me. So my kids did believe in Santa Claus for years, but they just wouldn't talk to me about it because I'm very forthright. I just say it as it is. And so I suppose we have a very honest relationship in our household when it comes to talking about things that are not appropriate and protecting themselves. And maybe not surprisingly, I have raised a bunch of blazing feminists. So even my son. So yeah, I like that. I like that, we're in a moment where we can be open about things like mental health. Even when I was growing up, it was very taboo to talk about depression. I mean, yeah, astonishingly so, actually. And so it makes me I want to talk about things. I want to make sure that they are prepared for the world and that they know they don't have to follow any particular path. They don't have to have children. They don't have to get married. They don't have to follow gender roles. So I'm very firm on that with them.
Maybe you need like a companion parenting book, you know?
Oh God, no.
How to raise a feminist or something. I don't know. It could be good. There must be a book. I mean, is there a book? I would Google it after this. If there's not a book, you should write it. You could even co-write it with your kids or something.
I did a project years ago because one of the things that really struck me when I became a parent, when I became a mother was...
Oh, I saw that, your anthology.
Yeah,
Yes.
I did a project called Writing Motherhood because I was just, well, I mean, many things struck me when I became a mother, as I think happened to all of us. But I think one of the things was that there was no literature at the time on motherhood. Like there was plenty on sleep routines, the Gina Ford manuals, but there wasn't as much dialogue as there is now on the institution of motherhood. And I find that really astonishing. And similarly, as I began to approach my 40s, I remember reading a poem by Mary Ruth. I was teaching it actually, a poem by Mary Ruefle, the American poet, and she was talking about keeping a cry log when she was in menopause for the number of times she cried each day that month. And she was talking about menopause. And I remember being struck that this was the first I had heard that menopause might make you cry all the time. And now there's a lot of material and literature on menopause, which is fantastic. But we seem to have had these times of just silence around women's issues. And yeah, it's always enraged me a little bit that we don't... I think it's important that we represent, that we have this in literature and that we publish it because it's been written. It's just not been published in the past.
So true. This friend of mine I talked to earlier and was like, yeah, I'm just having this pain in my knee and some of my other joints and da-da-da. And I was like, it's probably just menopause. Menopause is everything. It's like everything that could be going wrong with your emotions and your body. It's probably just that.
For real. For real though, because I had these weird joint pains in my fingers.
Me too.
And I Googled,
they thought I had...
I was like, I was like, what is this? Why do I have arthritis? What is this? So I Googled it and it said, could be perimenopause or menopause. I was like, I thought it was just hot flushes. That's what I've been told, that you get hot and your periods stop. That's it. So
our kids are going to grow up knowing a whole lot more. They'll be far more ready.
They hear it all. They hear it all. My poor son, my daughters are so vocal about like their periods. So he's a bit like, geez.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes I'm like, okay, simmer down, guys.
Yes, we don't need all
oversharing.
The information. Exactly. Oh but what a difference in like the way I grew up, and now it's a huge leap, and I think a lot of it is really positive.
I agree. I totally agree. Curious what happens with the next generation, but I guess we'll...
Oh, I know.
Hopefully see what their kids end up like. Okay, so what is your next book going to be?
So this is the one that's set in Capri.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We just talked about that. I always okay. I'm sorry. It's set in Capri.
I can give little bits of information. I'm just waiting on my edits, and it's going to be published again in the UK and the US. It's a film reunion, so we have a link back to the late 90s, early 2000s. I like that. I like looking back at those times, and this is what these characters do. I think it is White Lotus-y again because the hotel that they stay in plays a really important part. And actually, when I went to Capri, I wanted to find the hotel that was in my mind, and I did. I did. It was so freaky, and I was so excited. But like, it was perfect. It was right on the edge of this cliff. It had this view of the Bay of Naples. It's unreal, just the flat out ocean. You can see Mount Vesuvius, you can see Sorrento, all the little islands. And it was super pricey, but we stayed there one night. My husband came and we stayed for one night, right? Because I was like, it's not enough just to see it. I have to stay and kind of know this place. So, and they had this old wooden elevator. It was full on out of a Wes Anderson movie, just all perfectly Italian elegance. And it was just exactly like the hotel I had pictured in my mind. So I just find that when I go to a place that the book is set in, it enlivens it. And it's so important to me that that energy is there, the authenticity is there, and you pick up things that, I didn't know that it's illegal to wear flip-flops and capri.
No
And
way.
so
I didn't know that.
yes, they are very particular about their aesthetic
Huh.
because they're so glamorous. And you're also not allowed to walk around without a shirt on, like, because you get a lot of these beautiful, resorts that guys just take their shirt off, and I suppose they don't want that aesthetic for their residents. So, but it was wonderful. I picked up so much, and I just feel it made the book just lift up that bit more. So.
Well, I think you need to maybe you need to leave some breadcrumbs about like where you're going to go after that. I feel like you're picking all these fabulous spots, and I just want to go and follow along. Like I'll be like sneaking, you'll like turn around, I'll become a character. Like who's the creepy podcaster who's showing up like in all my destinations? But they sound so fun. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, so what advice do you have for aspiring authors?
Oh, keep going. Keep going. A writing career will have so many moments of feeling like you're just not cut out for this, that you'll never produce something that you're happy with. I just think you got to keep going. I've had so many peaks and troughs in my writing career. And I did have some moments where I thought my career was over, very dramatic, but it wasn't. It was a really tough time, but you just keep writing and you do actually get better if you just persist. I've written quite a few books that will never see the light of day, but that's okay because it's not wasted. It's actually all just teaching you things. There's so much to this art that I never knew. And that's partly why I continue to teach at Glasgow University, because everything that I've learned skill-wise, it goes into that. I teach MLit students and PhD students. So the thrust of what I'm saying is just keep going. If you've got the love for it, you just keep going with that project and be very patient and persistent, and you will get there.
Love it. Very inspiring. Caro, thank you so much. Thank you for the book, the adventures, and all the advice and everything else. So, thank you.
More than welcome. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Best of luck.
Right.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you love it, please leave a review and follow us on social at Zibby Owens and at Zibby Readers.